I've been reading ebooks for almost 25 years. I started in 2002 on a little pocket PC running Microsoft Reader. I bought my first Kindle in 2008. And over those years, I've heard people predict the death of ebooks more times than I can count. Yet here I am in 2026, still reading about a third of my books digitally. Hello, welcome to my channel. Another Bibliophile Reads. My name is Greg. Today I want to respond to two videos about ebooks. Michael K. Vaughan made a video called I Seem to Be Done with Ebooks, explaining why he's moving away from his Kindle and back towards print books. It's a thoughtful and definitely worth watching video. Steve Donahue responded with ebooks forever and argued, essentially, that ebooks are a superior reading technology. His video is also worth watching. I find myself somewhere in between them, but considerably closer to Steve. Because I think ebooks are an essential part of modern reading. And I also think many of the fears surrounding them are exaggerated. Let me start with a little history. I began reading ebooks in 2002 on what was then called a PDA, a personal digital assistant. Those were primarily productivity devices, but mine also ran Microsoft Reader. There were also places to buy ebooks online, including FictionWise and others, although the selection was nothing like we have today. You bought the book on a website, downloaded it to your computer, connected your PDA with a cable, and transferred the file over. It was cumbersome. The screen was tiny, but it worked. And that was also when I first encountered that three-letter acronym that has haunted ebook readers ever since. DRM. We'll get to that. In 2008, I bought my first Kindle, and that changed everything. Before the Kindle, buying an ebook often involved that whole process of downloading and transferring files. With the Kindle, you could buy a book wirelessly and start reading almost immediately. That was revolutionary. Amazon also pushed its famous $9.99 pricing model for many new releases. Later, Apple entered the market with an agency pricing system adopted by several major publishers, and the era of nearly universal $9.99 bestseller largely disappeared. Amazon also played an enormous role in expanding self-publishing and turning it into a viable way for authors to reach readers. And the Kindle itself kept getting better. Steve Donahue argues that in many respects, the e-reader is simply a more functional reading device than the physical book. Not everyone will agree with that, but I do, largely. Now, if I look around this room, I see the walls covered with physical books. Books I've read, books I haven't read, books I collect, and books I simply like owning. I love physical books. But if you handed me a new novel and offered me the choice between the hardcover and the ebook, most of the time I'd take the ebook. It's simply more convenient for me to read. And that brings me to Michael's objections. He raised some legitimate concerns, and each of those subjects could probably support a video on its own. So I'm only going to touch on them here. Let's start with DRM. When you buy most commercial ebooks from Amazon, Kobo, Apple, or another retailer, you're buying into an ecosystem that has DRM, digital rights management. It can restrict where and how that file can be used. An Apple ebook won't simply work on a Kindle. A Kindle book won't simply transfer to a Kobo. I don't like DRM. I don't think readers benefit from it. And I'm not convinced publishers benefit nearly as much as they think they do. But I also don't think DRM is a catastrophe it's sometimes made out to be. I've been buying DRM protected ebooks since 2002. It's occasionally inconvenient, yes. You can't have your Kindle and wave it at your Kobo and have files transfer over seamlessly. It locks readers into ecosystems. I'd be happy to see it disappear, but it hasn't caused me enough difficulty to abandon ebooks. And publishers such as Tor have sold books without DRM for years. I'd be perfectly happy to see more publishers follow their example. Michael also raised ethical concerns about buying from Amazon. That's fair. Amazon is a huge corporation with a long list of practices worthy of criticism. Michael referenced an early video of mine in which I argued that Amazon is hardly unique in its evil. Most of us regularly do business with enormous corporations whose practices we would object to if we examined them closely enough. But that doesn't excuse Amazon. But for me, signaling out Amazon while enthusiastically doing business with other questionable corporations doesn't solve the logical, ethical problem. Michael's final straw was Amazon removing the ability to download purchased Kindle books individually to a computer for USB transfer. For some readers, that was an important feature. For me, it was obsolete technology. It reminded me of those pre-Kindle days when every ebook had to be downloaded to a computer and moved to a device with a cable. I was delighted when wireless delivery made that unnecessary. Technology changes. Features disappear. Sometimes those features still matter deeply to a small group of users, and I understand why they're frustrated. But no technology company can support every feature forever. The same issue came up again when Amazon ended certain services for some of the oldest Kindle models. And this is always a difficult question. When does a company stop supporting old hardware? 5 years? 10? 15? 20? There's no answer that will satisfy everyone. If the old device still works perfectly well, understandably the owner thinks, why should I have to replace it? But eventually every technology platform reaches a point where the old hardware is no longer fully supported. Amazon can certainly be criticized for how it handled those transitions, but the transitions themselves are inevitable. Before I go any farther, I should point out that I've been talking a lot about Amazon and the Kindle. That's partly because Amazon is the company Michael focused on, but it's also because the Kindle is the e-reader I've used since 2008. I have used the Kobo a little. But these aren't uniquely Amazon problems. Kobo, Apple, Barnes & Noble, and other digital retailers also operate digital ecosystems. They use DRM on many of the books they sell, and purchasing an ebook from them generally means purchasing a license to access that book rather than owning a physical object. And because those books are managed through online accounts, the companies also have a degree of technical control over the content in your library. Amazon gets most of the attention, probably because it dominates the ebook market. But if we're going to discuss the potential problems with ebooks fairly. We shouldn't confuse the problems inherent to digital licensing and DRM with problems unique to Amazon. Amazon is simply the biggest target. And now we get to perhaps the biggest psychological fear surrounding commercial ebooks, regardless of which store you use. What if they take my books away? When you buy an ebook legally, you're generally purchasing a license to access the digital content rather than owning a physical object in quite the same way as you own the hardcover sitting on your shelf. That distinction, understandably, makes some people nervous. And there's one famous example everyone points to. In 2009, Amazon remotely removed copies of George Orwell's 1984 from customers' Kindles after discovering that the seller who had provided the book didn't have the rights to sell it. Amazon refunded the customers. But the irony of Amazon remotely removing 1984 was not lost on anyone, and the backlash was enormous. It remains possibly the most famous cautionary tale in the history of ebooks. But it's also worth remembering that it happened in 2009, and Amazon revised its policy, which allows customers who can keep ebooks purchased even if the seller didn't have the legal rights to offer the site title for sale. To the best of my knowledge, Amazon has not made a regular practice of reaching into customers' libraries and arbitrarily removing purchased books. I've been buying Kindle books since 2008, and I'm not aware of any purchased ebook disappearing from my library. That doesn't mean nobody has ever had a problem. But when claims are made that Amazon routinely removes purchased ebooks, I'd like to see the evidence. Stories about disappearing books spread easily because they touch a very reasonable fear that something we paid for can simply vanish. All the more reason to distinguish documented cases from rumors. Amazon and other digital retailers technically have enormous control over their ecosystems. That's worth remembering. But they could do something, and they routinely do it, are two very different claims. There's a related fear involving changes to the text itself. The controversy over revisions to Roald Dahl books is a good example. Dahl's publisher revised passages in newer editions of his books after consultation with sensitivity readers. Some ebook owners claimed that their previously purchased digital copies had also changed to contain the newer revisions. Others checked their copies and said they hadn't. I've never seen enough solid evidence to confidently explain exactly what happened in every case. And that's really my point. If we're going to criticize digital books because publishers or online resellers can secretly rewrite our libraries, I want documented examples rather than assumptions or rumors. Disturbingly, technically, digital books can be updated. That deserves scrutiny, but the possibility isn't the same thing as widespread practice. And this is where I think some discussions of ebooks lose perspective. We become so concerned about what might theoretically go wrong that we forget what ebooks actually give us. On the intro to all my videos, I say, another bibliophile reads, print, digital, audio. I mean that literally. I read roughly a third of my books in each format. And I don't think those formats are enemies. They're tools. Some books are better in print. If I'm reading something complicated and constantly flipping between notes, maps, appendices, and earlier chapters, give me a physical book. Some books are transformed by a great audiobook narrator. And some books are simply perfect as ebooks. Ebooks can keep obscure literature alive. Public domain books that would never justify a new print edition can remain readily available. Authors and estates can bring back long out of print books into circulation without the enormous expense of manufacturing, warehousing, and distributing physical copies. A reader can carry hundreds or thousands of books while traveling. You can change the font size, look up a word instantly, search the text, highlight passages, carry a 1,000-page novel without having to carry a 1,000-page novel. Those aren't trivial advantages. Steve argues that ebooks is, in some ways, improved technology over the physical book. I put it slightly differently. A physical book is a magnificent piece of technology. It's durable, simple, requires no battery, and has worked remarkably well for centuries. But think of a carpenter. A hand saw is an excellent tool. Sometimes it's exactly the right tool. But that doesn't mean the invention of the power saw was a mistake. Ebooks don't make physical books obsolete. They give readers another tool. And that's why I think print, digital, and audio form a powerful triangle. Each format does something the others don't. Together, they give us more access to books than readers at any previous point in history could have imagined. As for me, I'll probably continue buying most new books as ebooks or audiobooks. I'll save print for books that are out of print, collectible editions, beautiful editions, reference heavy books, or books that simply feel as though they ought to be held in your hands. I'm particularly fond of the New York Review of Books Classics editions. But that's me. Every reader is going to make a different choice. Michael may be done with ebooks. Steve may be ready for ebooks forever. I'm somewhere in between. I'm not done with physical books. I'm not done with audiobooks. And after almost 25 years, I'm definitely not done with ebooks. Thank you for watching, and as always, keep on reading.